So now we are going to look at Lively's opposition to Wayfarer's motion, nominate number 8, which is seeking to preclude evidence of Steve Sarowitz's wealth, financial resources, and the payment of dependents' legal fees. Starting position before we read this is obviously Lively has also sought to exclude evidence of her and her husband's wealth as well. Now, initially, I agreed. My starting point was, yeah, that's fair enough. It's not relevant. But same for Sarowitz. It's not really relevant. My position has now changed because we have seen the report. We've seen the argument as well from Wayfarer in regards to Lively and Reynolds' net wealth. Lively's own expert made numerous references and arguments to the theory of a power broker, whereby Baldoni himself is not considered exceptionally wealthy, but he has the backing of Steve Sarowitz, who is a billionaire, and that gives him something over Lively and Reynolds. But the argument that Wayfarer are making, and quite rightly so, which is an argument I also made as well when going through Lively's motion in limine, was, well, hold on a minute, the same could be said for Lively. Yeah, okay, on her own. I mean, she's got, she's worth tens of millions. So it's not a small amount. She's certainly worth more on her own. If it's just Lively against Baldoni, Lively is the more powerful. But she has the wealth backing of her husband, who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He may not be a Steve Sarowitz billionaire, but he has substantial wealth, and his name clearly makes waves in the entertainment, especially in the Hollywood industry. He, by Lively's own definition, she has dragons, and it's not just her husband. She was best friends with Taylor Swift. Her husband is best friends with people like Hugh Jackman, Sean Levy. These are not small players. And to kind of suggest that, there's that like the resources that Steve Sarowitz has means, well, he could have done this, and he probably did do this. He had the ability to smear Lively and Reynolds. It's just absolutely ridiculous, because actually the money is not, it's only going to get you so far. If you do not have the loyalty, you cannot command people to do things on your behalf, do your bidding, you can't win them over to support you, then it does not matter what your bank balance is. And then when we look at the reputation and the sway that the name pulled, well, let's look at the cast. All the cast did what Lively asked. They put pressure on Sony. Colleen Hoover put pressure on Sony at Lively's request. Matt Damon, who's a big name in himself, and his wife put pressure on Sony at Lively's request. Ryan Reynolds told Warren Zavala to, we need to do something about it. And Warren Zavala said, I'm going to bring in Tom Rothman. I'm going to bring in, Ari Emanuel. These are huge names who can put pressure on people. Literally, Warren Zavala said, Tom Rothman owes me a favor. So he was going to call in a favor on Ryan Reynolds' behalf. And he even cited, we're going to go to town, which means we are going to, tell everyone in the industry not to work with these people. Basically, blackball Wayfarer, Justin Baldoni. So when it comes to reputational sway, because I don't think money is on its own is enough. Steve Sarowitz could have all the money in the world, but if he can't get people to effect change or to do what he wants, then what's the point of the money? But if you can threaten people's careers, like Ryan Reynolds can and has a history of, he's done that, then maybe you've got more pull. But let's read this. So that's my starting point. I don't see it changing much. Wayfarer essentially, they opposed Lively and Reynolds' motion in limine to preclude their net wealth status. And they did an excellent job. This is Lively's attempt to oppose Wayfarer's request to preclude Steve Sarowitz's wealth. Evidence of Sarowitz's financial resources in this case is not being offered as inadmissible atmospherics of deep pockets. It is. But instead for the relevant purpose of proving through Sarowitz's own statements that Wayfarer engaged in unlawful retaliation. How is showing his net status going to prove that they engaged in unlawful retaliation? He's got a lot of money. How does that? I don't actually understand how that is going to prove that they actually did engage in anything unlawful. I mean, this woman subpoenaed 107 content creators in the hope of finding one or two, even just one or two, to prove that they were on Wayfarer's payroll. And she found nothing. Nothing. The jury is entitled to consider evidence showing how Sarowitz referenced his wealth in the context of threatening Lively, including both his statement at the New York City premiere that he was willing to spend $100 million to ruin the lives of Lively and Reynolds. I think it was to protect the business. As well as his later comment that he did not think Lively and Reynolds were actually billionaires in the context of promising to go after them if they were to ever cross the line. Do you know in do you know what? I'm going to bring in some UK law now. So okay, if someone is threatening, right? If someone makes a statement that's on the surface, it sounds like it's a bit of a threat, okay? But they also include negating words, then that cannot be credibly considered a threat. Right. This is obviously the UK position, right? So, this is an American case. It may well be different, but just to point out how ridiculous this is, I guess. The words here, right? So Lively is saying, well, Sarowitz, he's a billionaire and he's promising to go after us. And then the negating words, if we ever cross a line. So what that is actually saying is he's not going to do anything unless you cross a line. So has she crossed a line? Is she admitting that she crossed a line? And in the UK, we there's a case from 1669. Actually, it's Tauberville against Savage, and this is during the Assizes time, and the defendant said, "If it were not Assize time, I would not take such language from you." And a case was brought against him, for basically threat of assault. And the court held that rather than being a threat, the words were actually a declaration that he would not be assaulted, because he was not going to be assaulted because it was Assize time, and the entire statement was it was premised with, if it was not this time, I would do this or I would not take that. And I don't see how Lively here, Sarowitz hasn't done exactly the same thing. He has literally said, I'll go after you if you ever cross the line. So, and that is so open to interpretation. What line? What line are we talking about here? But honestly, is Lively in her mind, has she crossed the line and now she thinks that this is a threat? A little bit of a tangent there, but I just think this is so stupid. That it's like the whole Madison Square Gardens deposition thing again, where she's like, oh my God, Friedman's threatened me, and made a whole fucking big deal about it, and used it to leverage the judge to basically have her deposition on her own demands and conditions. And it's I think it's such a great example of how a simple statement, a meaningless statement, can be taken to the extreme and manipulated and twisted by Lively. And it is then now this has become a bit of a pattern now because she has done it over and over and over again. Um, and I would hope that that is how Wayfarer kind of argue this and say, well, hold on a minute. you know, the fact that he's got money means it doesn't mean he's actually done anything whatsoever. It's still for Lively to prove that, by the way. She's the one that has the burden. But by saying, well, look, I'm going to go after them if they cross the line, right? I've seen Ryan Reynolds say a damn sight worse in his text messages about Justin Baldoni. So, but what does she think that Sarowitz was actually saying by making that statement? Because I'm not hearing an immediate threat. I'm certainly not hearing a threat to Lively and Reynolds, their family, their lives, to literally destroy her. I don't understand why she's seeing these words as threats. Other than it benefits her to do that, because she can bring, a lawsuit for hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's before, if she gets the Section 47.1 treble damages, then that'll be that amount trebled. That's a lot of Steve Sarowitz's wealth gone. And it pushes Lively and Reynolds much closer to being billionaires themselves. And they are clearly jealous of Sarowitz being a billionaire. And if they feel intimidated and threatened because they're not, that's kind of a them problem, really. I don't know. Maybe Reynolds feels that he should be a billionaire for all the things he's done, all the acting jobs, all the businesses he owns, etc., all the marketing and various other things he's gotten involved with. Maybe he thinks, well, by now I should be a billionaire. What Steve Sarowitz done really to become a billionaire. And it doesn't matter what Steve Sarowitz has done to become a billionaire. He's done it and it worked. So, and whatever Reynolds has been doing so far has not got him to that status. And even marrying Blake Lively, who comes from a family who have been part of the entertainment industry for a long time. She was literally born into it. That still also didn't achieve that status. In fact, the only thing really that would have achieved Ryan Reynolds a billionaire status at this point, with everything he's done and all his wealth, if you combined it with Scarlett Johansson. So if he'd stayed married to Scarlett Johansson as of right now, they would be billionaires. Because she is worth so much money. She's one of the highest, if not the highest paid female actress in Hollywood. And that has got to very firmly stick in the throat of Blake Lively. But I'm sure there's a bit of Ryan Reynolds seething there that, he bet on the wrong horse. Never mind though. His loss is Colin Jost's gain. So in other statements, Sarowitz referenced his wealth as a way to minimize and dismiss Lively's and other women's complaints of harassment on set. She'd never complained about harassment to Steve. She never made him aware. That's in her deposition. She never made him aware of any of this. Further discouraging Wayfarer from investigating such claims. That's bullshit. In May 2023, when Baldoni shared with Sarowitz how the ladies had feelings about comments made on set, Sarowitz responded that he should come to set and remind Blake whose money this is. Okay. Similarly, I don't think it was in response to that particular... I don't remember, but... Similarly, regarding Lively's complaint that Sarowitz was on the closed set during the filming of the birth scene, Sarowitz testified in a portion of his deposition designated by defendants that, while I might have been technically non-essential, I did invest $30 million and paid for her salary. And I consider that to be essential. Now, I could wish he hadn't made that statement and given them that to run with. Like, I think there was enough you know, like I say, Madison Square Garden's comment from Friedman, I think there was enough to show that Lively, you know, mischaracterizes comments and statements and just throws them out there and then uses them against you over and over again, beats you around the head with them. I mean, she did that with his whole Hamas Israel thing and the dead bodies. So I do wish that Sarowitz had just not said that, because he sounded like he said it because he was getting irritated, right? And whilst he's technically correct, um, when we're talking about essential crew, Sarowitz, the fact that he invested in the film and there wouldn't be a film without him does not make him essential personnel in terms of Lively saying it was, you know, it should have been a closed set because I was simulating nudity. Then in that scenario, then Sarowitz would not be an essential person. But he has kind of said that in frustration, and understandably, because he's feeling like his role is being diminished, and it is. But in that scenario, like, all he's done really is given them something to just, you know, constantly throw around that and smack him around the head with it, and basically putting filings like this to say, well, hold on a minute now, you know, he keeps referencing his money, so now we should be able to talk about his net worth. And Lively makes a point. Both instances are evidence of Wayfarer wielding its power in the form of Sarowitz's wealth. Yes, unfortunately, yes, that's exactly what's happened. To silence or dismiss complaints about investigation. As such, this evidence is directly relevant to both retaliatory animus and punitive damages. The fact that Sarowitz has tapped into his considerable wealth to pay for the expenses in Wayfarer's smear campaign and retaliatory litigation also goes to the bias of numerous witnesses in the case. Sarowitz has testified that he provides all of the financing for Wayfarer, that what harms Wayfarer financially harms him personally, and appears to be financing the publicity expenses, vendor costs, and legal fees of not only Wayfarer, but a number of third-party witnesses. And let's just remind ourselves of who is being funded in this litigation. So we've obviously got all the Wayfarer defendants, right? We have Sarowitz, Baldoni, Heath. We've got Wayfarer, It Ends With Us Movie. And we've got Jen Abel, Melissa Nathan, Tag. He also funded Jed Wallace and Street Relations. And various third parties as well. So you've got Tara Hanks, Mitz Totskovich, various people, personnel at Wayfarer. Then on top of that, you've got all the cast as well. Jenny Slate, Isabella Ferrer. They were all funded. Their legal fees were all funded. Who else? I know there's other people, but you know, some of Lively star witnesses were also funded by Steve Sarowitz. So yeah. As such, Sarowitz has considerable bias as a testifying witness, and the jury is entitled to understand why. As defendants acknowledge, evidence of wealth is relevant to the determination of punitive damages. Despite no longer being a defendant in this action, Sarowitz's wealth remains highly relevant to determining the amount of appropriate punitive damages. Sarowitz not only testified that he is redacted, but that he is not sure where Wayfarer ends and I start when it comes to damages to Wayfarer's financial interest. Because Wayfarer through Sarowitz has access to virtually unlimited funding, the jury should consider the impact on Sarowitz's wealth in determining what punitive damages award would deter Wayfarer's wrongdoing. I mean, it's not unlimited, is it? There is a limit. It's a very large limit, but you know, being a billionaire, and when we say billionaire, he's not like, you know, Elon Musk billionaire. He is 2-3 billion at most. So, and that's got to be coming down quite a bit. But there is obviously a limit. Even if the court disagrees and deems general evidence of Sarowitz's wealth inadmissible, that ruling should not preclude Lively from introducing into evidence otherwise relevant and admissible statements made by Sarowitz himself that may reveal the extent of his wealth. The probative value of such evidence outweighs any potential prejudice of an inference of wealth, particularly when such an inference will be easily drawn from Sarowitz's role as financier of Wayfarer, and where Lively will similarly be presumed to have significant wealth, reducing the likelihood that the Lively is prejudiced one way or the other by class status. Okay. I do think that she's likely to be quite successful to get that information in, but I also think that Wayfarer will be equally successful in getting hers and Ryan Reynolds' wealth status in too. Just because it has been put at issue by Lively. Her own wealth, her husband's wealth, has been directly put at issue because of the testimony of her expert, Michael Robbins. So it should go in. Because if you're trying to say, well, the reason Justin Baldoni has so much power over Blake Lively is because he's backed by Steve Sarowitz, then you have to, then, the defense has to be, well, hold on a minute, she's backed by Ryan Reynolds, who's not even the monetary, what's the right word here? So the difference in money between Sarowitz and Ryan Reynolds is, Steve Sarowitz has probably got double the wealth that Ryan Reynolds has. Fine. But it's the name pull in the industry. Steve Sarowitz does not have that. Neither does Justin Baldoni, neither does Jamie Heath. Ryan Reynolds, though, you say his name, and as I said, he literally had heads at Sony, at WME, acting like trained chimps for him when he was sending those text messages kicking off. So that's my position. I wouldn't be surprised if Lyman agrees to everyone's wealth being brought into this, because they are all putting it. Sarowitz equally put his wealth at issue too by making a rather flippant statement during his deposition of all places. So I'm a little frustrated that he did that, and I think he should have known better, especially with what happened with the Hamas and Israel statement that he made in that Claire Ayub recording. I think he should have known better than to have given a gift wrapped comment like that she can now use and abuse. Okay, so next we're on to motion limine number 9, which is to preclude evidence relating to Brian Friedman. This one should be interesting.